All right, so this is a follow-up to the original how to skin a squirrel videos. If you're just finished watching those videos, or maybe you've seen them a while back, just a reminder, when we last finished off, we had just skinned this, or removed the skin from the carcass, and we had prepared the skin for storage. So we put a wet paper towel inside of it to prevent or reduce the risk of freezer burn. And now we've got a hide. We've got the old instant preserve inside, so we're just gonna dump that out, get that out of the way. We have a hide that has just recently been removed from the animal's carcass, and now we're going to prepare this hide for mounting. In the case of this class, this is likely going to end up just as a museum mount or round skin, but the process is pretty much the same for a lifelike mount until you get to the point of actually mounting it. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our tools. So I've got a pair of pliers here, just standard pair of pliers. I like to get the ones with the cutters on them for when we start to work with some of the wire, when we're wiring the animal together. Pair of tweezers, small pair of scissors. I like the ones with the curved cutting blades. Scalpel, I've got the old blade on here still, so I'm going to demonstrate how to safely replace that blade. Again, I have a fixed blade, so we'll see how this works. It's probably could use a sharpening, but we're going to use that to demonstrate how to use a fleshing board. I've got a little fleshing beam here. This is just one that I made myself. And then I also have another fleshing apparatus. This is just a ball or a rounded surface which we can stretch the skin over, and I'll demonstrate that when we get there. So, and then the last thing we have is some instant preserve. Calorex is a trade name. Instant Preserve, I believe, is also a trade name. Borax 20 Mule soap will do effectively the same thing, so you can get that at pretty much just about any supermarket. So I got a box, like a 4-pound box at Home Depot for $4, something like that. All right, so we're gonna replace our blade. We always wanna have a fresh blade. So again, being mindful of the bevel on the back side here, this little tab sort of locks into place on the handle. So we've got to flex that blade out away from the handle. We're gonna push away from us. I'm gonna set that off camera. So now we have our handle without a blade. I'm gonna open up a new blade. Actually, I shouldn't have taken it completely out of the package, so I'm gonna put it back in. Again, notice the 45-degree angle. We're gonna match that up to the angle on the handle. The handle is gonna go into the opening on the blade. We'll get it started just like that. We don't wanna push like this with the blade to risk getting cut. Okay, that fell off, so we could just pick that up and start that again. Now we're going to push down on a hard surface, locking that blade into place. I'm going to take my old blade and I'm going to put that into the packaging from the new blade so I can tape that up and take care of it in a sharps container. All right, so if you recall, where we left off last time is we had just removed the carcass. So we've got 4 legs, the lower legs, still attached to the hide. So we've got to remove all of that material. The meat, the fat, or the muscle and the fat is what's going to rot on us. And so we want to get this down to what we call the blue skin, which is that material right there, or that level of the skin. You can see it kind of has a blue hue to it. And I'm just pinching and pulling, and a lot of this muscle tissue is coming right off the hide. Right? And to the extent that we can use that technique, we want to, because that's the easiest way. Now, on some animals, you've got to be real gentle because the skin will tear very easily. For instance, if you are working with a dove or a quail, they have notoriously thin skin that tears very, very easily. So if you put just a little bit too much pressure, you're going to rip that skin apart. With these squirrels, they're a little bit more forgiving. Their skin is a little tougher. And of course, your larger mammals, even your larger birds are going to be somewhat more forgiving. But that doesn't mean that you won't rip the hide as you're working through this. So the more you do this, the more you'll learn, especially if you do a particular species over and over again. You'll learn what is too much pressure, what is acceptable. So I'm just continuing to remove this tissue. I want to, just like we did before, I want to turn this leg inside out. Now we've got to get all the way down. We've got to get all the way down to the pad here because there is muscle and fat in here. Now we can turn this inside out, and we're going to do that in this example. But another way to do this, of course, would be to come in here and make an incision along the foot or along the side of the foot, peel this open and remove that material, and then we can sew that up or glue that up later when we're putting the animal back together. But I'm going to demonstrate how to remove this leg by turning the skin inside out. And so I am just pulling on the skin, stretching out that connective tissue, and using my blade to cut through it, just like I did before when we were working on getting the hide off of the main part of the carcass. Right, and so this will go pretty easy until we start to get down past that, what would be the heel of the foot. So right about here, that joint there. Then it's gonna get, the diameter of the leg is getting narrower. It's gonna get a little more challenging. But this animal's still pretty fresh. So I have a feeling it's gonna go pretty well for us in this instance. If you have a squirrel that's been in the freezer for a long time and is maybe a little dehydrated, this could be more challenging because these thin parts around the feet are what tend to become dehydrated or freezer burned first. So there's a little bit of moisture here, so I'm just gonna put this instant preserve on here to kind of absorb that moisture and make it a little less slippery. Now, if I pull real hard, I could actually tear this skin and put a big hole in there. So again, I want to put a little bit of pressure, but not so much that I create some problems for myself. There we go, we're getting around the heel of the foot there. Get that tail out of the way so you can see. Tug, a little more instant preserve, get in there. We want to get this all the way down to the toes because there's muscles down in that foot, there's fat down in the pad of that foot that we want to get out because that is what's going to rot on us as this is drying. The oils from the fat, if we don't remove it, will leach out. They'll ruin the fur. They'll cause an odor. It'll attract insects. So we've really got to get all of that material off the hide. And so I'm just continuing to, I'm holding the leg down with my right hand, the same hand that I'm holding the blade. And then I'm kind of pulling with my left hand here, stretching that connective tissue. See if I can demonstrate that. You can see kind of the white cottony looking tissue there. That's the connective tissue. That's what I'm cutting with the blade. Give it a little tug, expose a little more. We're getting to the underside of the foot. We're exposing that pad. We're starting to get to the tarsals here, the toe bones. And again, you may put some holes in the hide here. That's okay, especially if it's your first animal, your first squirrel. Expect some mistakes, but the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. right at the toe. That would be the underside of the foot. So now I'm just gonna take my fingers and pull this down. Now we want to leave the claws attached, right? So you can kind of see where we're at on the animal there. So I'm gonna take this, turn it just a little bit more on the underside. We're gonna have to clean all of that out. So I'm gonna do that right now because with that bone still attached, it kind of gives me a little extra leverage here, something to hold on to. I'm gonna clean those toe pads out. Get that muscle and fat off of there. Nice pair of pointy scissors. It really comes in handy because you can kind of use it as a poker to kind of open up that tissue, get down in there, get down into some tight spaces. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pliers with my diagonal cutters, and I'm just going to cut those toes off right there at the knuckle. We've got one leg removed. All right, and now we've got, well, here's the hide, the leg skin, but we've still got some tissue up here that we need to remove. So we're gonna reach in here and grab a hold of any of that muscle that's still on the hide. All right, it looks like there's maybe just a little bit there. If we have to, we can take this scalpel and kind of score that tissue. Careful to not, try to not cut through the skin. But I'm just cutting through some of that. Looks like that's maybe just a little bit of connective tissue there. Yep, see, so I tried to pull that off and got a little hole in the leg, so we're down pretty far. I think we're gonna stop right there. Again, holes happen, not the end of the world. Now I'm just working my way back up and peeling that skin away. I'll try to grab these with some pliers here. Now, I could keep pulling this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna demonstrate how we might use our scalpel to remove this tissue. So here we've got a big chunk of muscle connected to the skin. So I'm just gonna hold that skin down, pull that muscle, stretch it out a little bit. Again, just kind of stretching that connective tissue and cutting through it, being careful not to cut through the skin itself. And we're just gently letting the very sharp blade do the work until we remove that tissue. There you go. So that's another way to do it. So we got one leg out. I'm gonna switch over to the other side. I'm gonna get the other leg before I start worrying about the rest of the hide here. That instant preserve also it removes some of that excess fluid or absorbs it. It makes it a little easier to grab on to the hide or the muscle, so you have a little better control over it. Yes, pull it back. Exactly. There. Sometimes if you just give it a pull and use your thumbnail, you can make quick work of it. Sometimes that connective tissue needs to be cut. Most of the time, I would say it needs to be cut, but here, it was turning pretty good. I did cut a little hole in the pad, but again, not the end of the world. Taxidermy is about solving problems. That's a big part of the game. Whether you create them or whoever handled the animal before you got it, created them, you've got to solve them as the taxidermist. Sometimes things tear, you cut things, stuff happens. All right, we just got to be able to put it back together. So there we've got, you can see I put kind of a big hole there. Again, I'm not too worried about that, especially since this one's going to be a round skin or a museum mount, but even still, that's something we could deal with. If I was trying to do, you know, an aesthetic mount or a lifelike mount, we could work with that. So now I'm just kind of cleaning out the bottom of the pad. Now I'm gonna cut these toes off. And before I do that, let me turn these just a little bit more. There we go. There, I've got those knuckles exposed. Now I'm going to come back here, cut through those. Now we've got the other leg exposed. See, that tissue is wanting to hold on a little more. So we got the two back legs cleaned out. Now let's work on the front legs. And it's the same process. All that toe. And now what I'm doing is I'm just taking my thumbnail, scraping it along the bones and pushing that skin to kind of break that connective tissue and get it turned inside out. See, so we're almost to the end there where we want to be, but we still got some connective tissue holding on. So, and this is where our blade starts to get dull because we're cutting up against the bone and it dulls these blades kind of quick. So don't be shy about changing your blade out when necessary. It'll save you a lot of frustration and anger, and even, believe it or not, you'll probably put more holes in the hide with a dull blade than you would with a sharp blade because you're going to be putting more pressure, you're going to be frustrated, you're just going to probably be more inclined to make a mistake than if you had a nice sharp knife blade that was making cuts the way you think they should be made. So there we go. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these toes off. Again, all we want are the very tips of the toes with the nails still connected. There we go. I got a little tendon there, so I'm just going to cut that off. Trim that down nice and neat. Still got a little work to do there. And then let's get this other leg. We're getting closer and closer to the finish line. Still got a lot of work to do though. I'm just using my right hand to hold that leg bone down. I'm pulling the skin tight with my left and letting the blade do the work. Give it a little tug. Expose some of that connective tissue. where we want it. And now I'm just gonna cut through these bones here. Tissue hanging. And now we've got all 4 legs out. So now we can turn our attention to the rest of the hide. So we've still got to clean out all of this stuff. All right, so we got a lot of fat and some muscle left in a few places. So we'll get that taken care of around the rear end, quite a bit of muscle left. And then the face, and the face is really important. There's a lot of musculature around the face, and you'll notice the lips, how fat they are and how soft they are. We've got to do what's called split those lips and get that muscle out. So right now, we're just gonna keep working on it. So I think I demonstrated in the last video what I like to do with these curved scissors. So I'll just do that again. I'm just simply stretching the hide over my finger and then using the scissors to kind of cut through it. You can see, I don't know if it comes out in the camera, but you can see some of the oils from the fat as I begin to rupture those cells. If we don't remove this fat, that stuff will eventually leak out and ruin the mount. So we're gonna get all of this stuff off before we finish the mount. We wanna get down to that blue skin, and you can kind of see that blue skin there. Okay, a lot of fat. This is one way to do it. Another way, move this out of the way. This is just actually just a ball from the end of a curtain rod, and I like to just stretch this hide over, and you can take your scalpel and just make some, almost hold it parallel to the ball. Be patient, don't rush yourself, because you don't want to cut yourself, but you also don't want to run a hole in the hide. And this is very much just like using a fleshing beam. This is a little more detailed work. We're working in a smaller area than we would, especially on a large beam. We wouldn't use a large beam on a small animal anyways, but this works pretty good on these open spaces around the hide that don't have a lot of detail, right? So we're not shaving the eyes down here. We're not splitting the lips on this. We're just simply taking our blade and cutting down through some of that connective tissue and fat and muscle that's left on the hide, and removing it. And you can see it's kind of coming off here, right? You can also grab a hold of it and pull it and peel it that way, but we're just gonna continue to work it down, away. You can work towards YouTube, but sometimes it just feels like working down away from you works best. And again, you gotta be careful, because you can put holes in the hide, and you want a sharp blade when you do this. You don't want a dull blade, because if you've got a dull blade, you're gonna be putting more pressure, because it's not gonna cut, it's just gonna slide right over the top, and you're gonna create some problems. Actually, here I got a little bit too low, so we exposed some of the follicles. Not bad, but we definitely don't want to do that if we can avoid it. So I'm just working this tissue away from me. We're getting down towards the edge of the incision, our first incision. All right, we're going to continue to remove this tissue all the way to the edge of the hide. Now that edge of the hide is a tricky part, because it'll roll up on you and hide some tissue. It looks like you've gotten it all, but it's actually there, especially when you're doing birds. And I'll put together a video about birds as well to kind of demonstrate that process, which is very much the same as this process, but there are some differences. And so we're just going to continue to work this tissue. big chunks of fat coming off. We've got to get all of that stuff completely off the skin. And notice that I'm pulling the skin tight. If you just have it loose over the ball or over the fleshing beam, you're gonna create some problems for yourself. It's not gonna work right. You'll be frustrated. So make sure you pull that skin tight. Right at the edge, you can see it's a little tricky sometimes right at the edge, but we're just gonna keep our blade kind of at the same angle. Just wipe some of that fat. You can see how greasy that is. I'm gonna get all that off. All right, and we would just continue that process. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna demonstrate. Notice that, it's getting clean. We still got some tissue here. We still gotta wash and rinse this skin and make sure we got it off. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna demonstrate another fleshing board technique.